Your brain is running on empty, and everyone keeps telling you to just breathe through it. But what if I told you that ancient Roman emperors and Greek philosophers figured out something about anxiety that modern psychology is only now catching up to? What if the secret to rewiring your exhausted mind isn't another breathing exercise or mindfulness app, but a mental training system that's been battle-tested for over 2,000 years? Here's the truth nobody talks about. Your anxious, tired brain isn't broken. It's just been running the wrong software. The Stoics understood that anxiety isn't something that happens to you. It's something your mind creates through faulty thinking patterns. And here's the kicker. They developed specific mental techniques that literally rewire how your brain processes stress, worry, and overwhelm. Marcus Aurelius used these exact methods while running an empire. Epictetus taught them to students who went on to change the world. Today, you're going to learn how to install this ancient operating system into your modern mind. No fluff, no feel-good platitudes, just practical mental tools that work. By the end of this session, you'll have a completely different relationship with your thoughts, your worries, and your peace of mind. Part 1. The Emperor's Reset Button. There's a moment in every emperor's reign when the weight of the world becomes unbearable. Marcus Aurelius faced plagues, wars, and political chaos that would crush most minds. Yet he discovered something that modern neuroscience is only now proving works. When your brain is drowning in worry, there's a mental technique that instantly puts everything into perspective. But here's what's fascinating about this approach. Most people try to shrink their problems by thinking smaller. Marcus Aurelius did the exact opposite. He expanded his view until his problems became microscopic. Picture your biggest worry right now, the thing that's been eating at your peace of mind. What if I told you that this exact worry has an expiration date built into it? Every anxious thought you're having right now is temporary, but your mind tricks you into believing it's permanent. The emperor understood something crucial about time and perspective that your tired brain has forgotten. This is technique number 1 out of 10 that will completely rewire how your mind processes anxiety. When you zoom out far enough, even the most overwhelming problems reveal their true size. Your promotion stress, relationship drama, financial concerns, they all shrink when viewed through the lens of decades. Aurelius would mentally project his current struggles forward 10 years. In most cases, what seemed earth-shattering in the moment became completely irrelevant from that vantage point. But he didn't stop at 10 years. He pushed his perspective to 100 years, then 1,000 years. From a millennium's view, it vanishes entirely. This isn't about minimizing your feelings. It's about giving your brain accurate data about what actually deserves your mental energy. The technique works because it activates your brain's ability to contextualize. When you're stuck in anxiety, your mind magnifies threats and shrinks your resources. The Emperor's reset button reverses this process. You magnify your perspective and watch your worries shrink to their actual size. Your anxious brain will resist this at first. It's designed to focus on immediate threats. But when you consistently practice cosmic perspective, something remarkable happens. Your default mental setting shifts from panic to peace. Part 2. The Slave Superpower. Epictetus was born into slavery, yet he became one of history's most mentally free individuals. How does someone with no physical freedom develop unshakable inner peace? He discovered what might be the most powerful psychological tool ever created. But here's the twist that changes everything. While everyone else was trying to control their external circumstances, Epictetus learned to find freedom in what he couldn't control. Your anxious mind is constantly fighting battles it can never win. Every worry in your head falls into one of 3 categories: but most people never learn to sort them properly. This sorting system is so powerful that once you master it, anxiety becomes almost impossible. Why? Because you'll finally stop wasting mental energy on the wrong things. This is technique number 2 out of 10, and it's going to revolutionize how you think about control. Epictetus called it the fundamental distinction, but I call it the circle of control inventory. Every single worry, fear, or stressor in your life can be placed into one of 3 buckets. First bucket contains things you have complete control over: your thoughts, your actions, your responses, your effort. Second bucket holds things you have partial control over: your health, your relationships, your career success. Third bucket contains everything you have 0 control over: other people's opinions, the weather, the past, the future. Here's where it gets interesting. Most anxious people spend 80% of their mental energy on bucket 3, the things they can't control. They worry about what others think, stress about future outcomes, replay past mistakes. Epictetus discovered that this is mental slavery. You're giving your peace of mind to forces beyond your influence. But here's the radical part that nobody talks about. Epictetus didn't just accept what he couldn't control. He celebrated it. He saw everything in bucket 3 as freedom from responsibility. If you can't control the outcome of a job interview, you're free from the burden of guaranteeing success. If you can't control someone's opinion of you, you're liberated from the impossible task of managing their thoughts. The slave superpower isn't learning to let go. It's learning to feel grateful for what's not your responsibility. When you truly internalize this distinction, your anxiety transforms into relief. You realize you've been carrying weights that were never yours to carry. Part 3. The Fortress Mind Architecture. Ancient fortresses weren't built with walls alone. The smartest military architects included watchtowers that provided early warning and strategic oversight. Your mind needs the same kind of defensive architecture, but not the kind you think. Instead of building walls to keep thoughts out, you're going to construct mental watchtowers that let you see thoughts coming from miles away. Most people try to fight their anxious thoughts directly. They build mental walls, trying to block worries from entering their minds. But here's what's fascinating about the brain. The harder you try to keep thoughts out, the more persistently they knock on your door. There's a completely different approach that ancient philosophers used, and modern psychology has proven it works better than any other method. This is technique number 3 out of 10, and it's going to change how you relate to every anxious thought you have. Instead of being in the middle of your mental battlefield, you're going to position yourself above it. Imagine having a bird's-eye view of your own thinking process. From this elevated perspective, thoughts lose their power to overwhelm you. The Fortress Mind architecture works by creating specific observation points for different types of anxious thoughts. When work stress appears, you have a dedicated watchtower for professional worries. When relationship anxiety surfaces, there's a separate vantage point for personal concerns. Future fears get their own observation deck. Past regrets have their own lookout post. Here's how you build these mental watchtowers. When an anxious thought appears, instead of engaging with it or fighting it, you step back mentally and observe it from your designated vantage point. You might say, I notice I'm having a thought about work deadline pressure. I'm now in my professional concern watchtower, observing this worry from a distance. The magic happens in that moment of mental stepping back. The thought doesn't disappear, but it loses its urgency. From your watchtower, you can see the thought clearly without being consumed by it. You notice its patterns, its triggers, its intensity, all without getting swept away by its emotional current. This isn't about suppression or denial. It's about changing your relationship with thoughts. Instead of being trapped inside your worries, you become the calm observer of them. Your anxious thoughts become weather patterns you watch from a safe, elevated position. They pass through your mental landscape, but they don't define your experience. Part 4. The Philosopher's Death Rehearsal. Every attachment in your life is temporary, but your brain pretends they're permanent. This creates a hidden source of anxiety that most people never address directly. Philosophers discovered something counterintuitive about fear and loss. The more you avoid thinking about losing something, the more anxious you become about keeping it. But there's a practice that builds emotional resilience by facing impermanence head-on. Marcus Aurelius and other Stoic philosophers regularly practice something that sounds morbid, but is actually liberating. They would mentally rehearse loss, not to become pessimistic, but to develop unshakable gratitude and emotional strength. Modern psychology calls this technique defensive pessimism, and research shows it dramatically reduces anxiety while increasing life satisfaction. This is technique number 4 out of 10, and it's going to transform how you experience attachment and fear. Instead of trying to hold on to things tighter when you're anxious about losing them, you're going to practice mental letting go. This isn't about giving up on what you love. It's about loving more freely because you're not constantly afraid of loss. The philosopher's death rehearsal works through what I call temporary loss practice. You deliberately imagine losing things you're attached to, but not permanently. You rehearse temporary separation to build permanent emotional resilience. Start with small attachments. Imagine your favorite coffee shop closing down. Notice the initial resistance. Then observe how you could adapt and find alternatives. Move to bigger attachments gradually. Imagine losing your current job. Instead of panicking, walk yourself through how you would rebuild. What skills would you use? What opportunities might open up? How would you support yourself during the transition? The goal isn't to become detached from life. It's to become confidently attached, knowing you can handle whatever changes come. Here's what happens in your brain during this practice. When you voluntarily rehearse loss in a calm state, you're programming your nervous system with coping strategies. If real loss ever occurs, your brain already has a roadmap for handling it. This reduces the fear of loss because you've mentally proven to yourself that you're resilient. The beautiful paradox is that when you're no longer afraid of losing something, you can love it more fully. Your relationships deepen because you're not constantly anxious about them ending. Your career satisfaction increases because you're not desperately clinging to security. You appreciate what you have because you've mentally practiced gratitude for its temporary nature. Part 5. The Merchant's Ledger Method. Successful merchants don't just track money. They track value, profit, loss, and long-term investments. Your brain is constantly keeping score too, but it's probably tracking the wrong things. Most anxious minds obsess over external achievements and failures, while ignoring the internal wealth they're building every single day. There's a different kind of accounting system that rewires your brain for peace instead of pressure. Ancient philosophers understood something modern society has forgotten. Your character is your most valuable asset, but it's also the hardest to measure. While everyone else is competing for external rewards, you can be building internal strength that no one can take away from you. This creates a different relationship with success and failure that eliminates most sources of anxiety. This is technique number 5 out of 10, and it's going to change what your mind pays attention to throughout each day. Instead of measuring your worth by productivity, approval, or achievement, you're going to start tracking something more valuable. You're going to become the accountant of your own virtue, keeping a mental ledger that builds confidence from the inside out. The Merchant's Ledger method works by shifting your attention from external validation to internal development. Every day, you're going to track 4 types of value that you're creating. Wisdom moments when you learned something new or made a thoughtful decision. Justice moments when you treated someone fairly or stood up for what's right. Courage moments when you faced a fear or did something difficult. Temperance moments when you showed self-discipline or moderation. Here's how this rewires your anxious brain. Instead of constantly scanning for external threats or opportunities, your mind starts noticing internal growth. Did you remain calm during a stressful conversation? That's courage credits in your mental account. Did you listen carefully to someone's problems without trying to fix them? That's wisdom currency you just earned. The beauty of this system is that you're always earning value, regardless of external circumstances. Bad day at work? You can still rack up patience points. Relationship conflict? Opportunity to build justice credits by being fair even when you're upset. Financial stress? Chance to develop temperance by living within your means. Your brain loves to keep score, but most people let it track the wrong game. When you redirect your mental accounting toward character development, anxiety naturally decreases. You're no longer dependent on external circumstances for your sense of worth. Your confidence becomes internally generated and externally unshakable. This doesn't mean you stop caring about external goals. It means you build internal stability that makes external challenges manageable. When your core identity is based on character growth rather than external achievement, setbacks become learning opportunities instead of identity threats. Part 6. The commander's strategic pause. In the heat of battle, rushing toward action gets soldiers killed. Wise commanders know that the most critical moment isn't when they're moving forward, but when they pause to assess the situation. Your anxious brain is constantly rushing toward panic, but there's a military-grade technique that stops anxiety in its tracks. The secret isn't in taking deeper breaths, it's in asking better questions. When anxiety hits, your brain switches to emergency mode. Logical thinking shuts down, and you start reacting instead of responding. Most anxiety advice tells you to calm down first, then think clearly. But there's a more effective sequence that warriors have used for centuries. You can think your way to calm instead of waiting for calm to restore your thinking. This is technique number 6 out of 10. And it's going to give you tactical control over anxiety attacks. Instead of being overwhelmed by anxious feelings, you're going to interrogate them, like a skilled commander gathering intelligence. Every anxiety spike contains useful information, but you need the right questions to extract it. The commander's strategic pause works through what I call tactical questioning. When you feel anxiety rising, instead of fighting the feeling or trying to breathe it away, you immediately ask 3 specific questions. These aren't random questions. They're designed to activate your brain's rational processing centers, while your emotional centers are still activated. First question: what assumption am I making right now? Anxiety always starts with an assumption about threat, danger, or loss. Your brain is making predictions about what might happen, but it's presenting these predictions as facts. This question forces you to separate actual information from mental speculation. Are you assuming the worst outcome? Are you assuming you can't handle what's coming? Name the assumption, and it loses half its power. Second question: what would a wise person do in this exact situation? This question immediately connects you to your highest thinking, rather than your most fearful thinking. You're not asking what you feel like doing or what your anxiety is demanding. You're asking what wisdom looks like in this moment. This shifts your brain from reactive mode to strategic mode. Third question: how does this situation serve my character development? This is the most powerful question because it transforms threats into training opportunities. Instead of asking why bad things happen to you, you're asking how challenging things can make you stronger, wiser, or more resilient. These 3 questions create what I call the strategic pause. Your anxiety doesn't disappear immediately, but it transforms from panic into useful information. You move from being anxiety's victim to being its commander. Part 7. The Scholar's Premeditation Protocol. Elite athletes don't just practice their sport. They mentally rehearse every possible scenario they might face during competition. They visualize successful performances, but they also prepare for obstacles, setbacks, and unexpected challenges. Your anxious brain needs the same kind of mental preparation, but not the kind that creates more worry.
There's a way to rehearse difficulties that builds confidence instead of fear.
Most people avoid thinking about potential problems because they're afraid it will manifest more problems. But there's a crucial difference between anxious worrying and strategic preparation. Worrying imagines problems without solutions. Strategic preparation imagines problems with responses. One creates helplessness, the other creates readiness. This is technique number 7 out of 10, and it's going to transform how you approach challenging situations. Instead of being caught off guard by difficulties, you're going to pre-install calm, rational responses. When problems arise, your brain will already have a playbook ready instead of scrambling to create solutions under pressure. The scholar's premeditation protocol works through what I call obstacle immunization. Just like vaccines expose your immune system to small amounts of disease to build resistance, this technique exposes your mind to manageable amounts of difficulty to build psychological resilience. You're going to mentally rehearse challenging scenarios, not to worry about them, but to prepare for them. Here's how you practice obstacle immunization. Choose a specific challenging situation you might face in the near future. A difficult conversation, a presentation, a job interview, a medical appointment. Instead of hoping it goes perfectly or worrying that it will go terribly, you're going to mentally walk through multiple scenarios with calm preparation. First, visualize the situation going smoothly. See yourself handling it with confidence, wisdom, and grace. This programs your brain with positive expectations and successful behavioral patterns. But don't stop there. Now, imagine the situation becoming more challenging. What if they ask unexpected questions? What if they disagree with your ideas? What if technical problems occur? For each potential obstacle, mentally rehearse a calm, thoughtful response. Don't imagine yourself panicking or failing. See yourself adapting gracefully to whatever arises. This isn't about planning for the worst-case scenario. It's about building mental flexibility and response options. The magic happens when you actually face these situations in real life. Instead of your brain going into panic mode because something unexpected happened, it recognizes the scenario as something you've already handled successfully in your mind. Your nervous system stays calmer because it feels prepared rather than surprised. This technique transforms anxiety from what if something goes wrong to I've already thought through how to handle whatever comes up. You become anti-fragile, not just resilient. Challenges make you stronger because your mind has been trained to see obstacles as opportunities to demonstrate the skills you've been developing. Part 8. The Citizen's Perspective Engine. Every difficult situation in your life is asking you a question, but most people are listening to the wrong question. Your anxious brain asks, why is this happening to me? This question creates victimhood, resentment, and helplessness. But there's a different question that transforms every challenge into wisdom. Ancient philosophers discovered that changing your questions changes your entire experience of life. When you're stuck in anxiety, you're usually stuck in the wrong story about what's happening. Your brain creates narratives that put you at the center of some cosmic unfairness. The job rejection means you're not good enough. The relationship conflict means you're not lovable. The financial pressure means you're failing at life. But these stories are optional, and there are much better stories available. This is technique number 8 out of 10, and it's going to revolutionize how you interpret challenging experiences. Instead of being the victim in your life story, you're going to become the student. Every difficult situation becomes a customized lesson designed specifically for your growth. This isn't positive thinking, it's practical wisdom. The Citizen's Perspective Engine works by shifting from victim questions to wisdom questions. Instead of asking, why is this happening to me? You ask, how is this teaching me? This simple shift activates completely different neural pathways in your brain. Victim questions create stress hormones and narrow your thinking. Wisdom questions create learning hormones and expand your perspective. Here's how to implement this perspective shift. When you're facing any challenging situation, resist the natural urge to ask why it's happening or who's to blame. Instead, get curious about what it's trying to teach you. Is this situation teaching you patience? Is it showing you the importance of better boundaries? Is it revealing strengths you didn't know you had? The financial pressure might be teaching you resourcefulness and priority setting. The difficult boss might be showing you how to maintain integrity under pressure. The health scare might be reminding you what truly matters in life. The relationship challenge might be developing your communication skills and emotional maturity. This doesn't mean you should be grateful for genuinely harmful situations or stay in abusive circumstances. It means you can extract wisdom and strength from whatever you're experiencing, while also taking appropriate action to improve your situation. You become an active participant in your own development rather than a passive victim of circumstances. The perspective engine creates what I call educational immunity. Once you've learned the lesson that a particular type of challenge was designed to teach, you become less vulnerable to being derailed by similar challenges in the future. You've upgraded your mental operating system with new wisdom and capabilities. Your anxiety decreases because you're no longer confused about why difficult things happen. They happen because growth requires resistance, wisdom requires experience, and strength requires testing. You become anti-fragile because every challenge makes you more capable of handling the next one. Part 9. The Traveler's Detachment Practice. When you visit a foreign country, you observe different customs with curiosity rather than judgment. You don't try to change the local culture or get upset that things work differently than at home. You're just passing through, experiencing something temporary and interesting. Your emotions deserve the same kind of respectful, detached observation. There's a way to experience feelings without being controlled by them. Most people have one of two problematic relationships with their emotions. Either they suppress feelings and pretend they don't exist, or they merge completely with emotions and let feelings dictate their behavior. Both approaches create suffering. There's a third option that philosophers and meditation masters have used for centuries, and it's more elegant than either fighting or surrendering to your emotional states. This is technique number 9 out of 10, and it's going to transform your relationship with anxiety, anger, sadness, and every other emotion you experience. Instead of being afraid of feelings or controlled by them, you're going to become an emotional tourist in your own mind. You'll observe your inner landscape with the same fascinated curiosity you'd have exploring a new city. The traveler's detachment practice works by creating psychological distance between you and your emotions. You are not your anxiety. You are the person experiencing anxiety. You are not your anger. You are the consciousness observing anger moving through your system. This distinction is subtle but revolutionary. It means emotions become temporary weather patterns in your mental sky, instead of defining features of your identity. Here's how to practice emotional tourism. When a strong emotion arises, instead of immediately reacting to it or trying to get rid of it, take a step back mentally and observe it with curiosity. Notice where you feel it in your body. Is anxiety tight in your chest? Is anger hot in your face? Is sadness heavy in your stomach? Become fascinated by how emotions create physical sensations. Notice the thoughts that accompany the emotion. What stories is your mind telling? What predictions is it making? What memories is it accessing? Watch these mental processes like you'd watch an interesting documentary. You're gathering information about how your psychological system works without getting lost in the content. Notice how the emotion changes over time. Emotions are naturally impermanent, but we often don't notice because we're too busy fighting them or feeding them. When you observe with detached curiosity, you'll see that even intense emotions have natural rhythms. They rise, peak, and fall like waves. The power of this practice is that you maintain your ability to respond wisely while emotions are present. You don't suppress the feeling, but you don't let it hijack your decision-making either. You can feel angry and still speak calmly. You can experience anxiety and still take constructive action. You can feel sad and still show up for your responsibilities. This creates emotional resilience without emotional numbness. You become someone who feels deeply but isn't controlled by feelings. Your emotions become useful information rather than overwhelming experiences. Part 10. The Sage's Evening Audit. At the end of each day, most people either celebrate their wins or beat themselves up over their mistakes. Both approaches miss the most important information available. Your daily experiences are constantly teaching you about your character, your values, and your growth edges. But you need the right questions to extract this wisdom. There's a form of self-reflection that builds inner strength instead of inner criticism. Traditional self-reflection often becomes self-judgment. You replay conversations looking for what you did wrong. You analyze your performance, searching for ways you fell short. You compare your reality to your ideals and find yourself lacking. This kind of reflection creates anxiety instead of insight. There's a different approach that philosophers use to build unshakable character and peace of mind. This is technique number 10 out of 10, and it's going to become the foundation of your mental rewiring process. Every evening, you're going to conduct a gentle audit of your day, not looking for mistakes or successes, but looking for moments when you were driven by wisdom versus moments when you were driven by fear. This distinction is the key to training your brain to default to calm instead of chaos. The Sage's evening audit works by tracking the most important battle happening in your mind every day. There's a constant competition between your highest self and your most anxious self. Your highest self makes decisions based on values, wisdom, and long-term thinking. Your anxious self makes decisions based on fear, reactivity, and short-term impulses. The goal isn't to eliminate your anxious self, but to gradually tip the balance toward wisdom. Here's how to conduct your evening audit. Before you go to sleep, set aside 5 minutes to review your day through this specific lens. Think through the decisions you made, the conversations you had, the reactions you chose. For each significant moment, ask yourself, was I operating from wisdom or from anxiety in this situation?
When you chose to have that difficult conversation instead of avoiding it, that was wisdom winning. When you snapped at someone because you were stressed, that was anxiety taking control. When you took time to think before responding to a challenging email, that was wisdom. When you procrastinated on an important task because it felt overwhelming, that was anxiety driving. The key is to observe these patterns without judgment. You're not keeping score to judge yourself. You're gathering data to understand how your mind works and how to gradually shift toward more wisdom-driven choices. Notice what triggers your anxiety-driven responses. Notice what helps you access your wise responses. This audit gradually rewires your brain's default settings. When you regularly review how wisdom feels different from anxiety, you start recognizing the difference in real time. You catch yourself earlier when anxiety is taking control. You consciously choose wisdom more often because you've trained yourself to notice when you have that choice. Over time, this practice creates what the Stoics called the inner citadel, an unshakable core of calm that exists regardless of external circumstances. Your peace of mind becomes internally generated instead of externally dependent. These 10 techniques aren't just mental exercises. They're the blueprint for rewiring a tired, anxious brain into a calm, resilient mind. The Emperor's cosmic perspective teaches you to see your problems at their actual size. The Slave's control inventory frees you from carrying burdens that aren't yours. The Watchtowers give you distance from overwhelming thoughts. The temporary loss practice builds emotional resilience. The Virtue Ledger creates internal confidence. The strategic pause transforms panic into wisdom. The obstacle immunization prepares you for challenges. The perspective engine turns problems into lessons. The emotional tourism lets you experience feelings without being controlled by them. And the evening audit gradually shifts your default from anxiety to wisdom. Your brain has been running on anxiety because that's what it was trained to do. But neural pathways can be rewired at any age. Every time you choose one of these techniques instead of your old anxious patterns, you're literally building new neural highways in your brain. The more you use these new pathways, the stronger they become. The less you use your old anxious pathways, the weaker they get. This isn't about perfection, it's about progress. Some days you'll remember to use these techniques, other days you'll forget and fall back into old patterns. That's not failure, that's learning. Every time you notice you've fallen into anxiety and consciously choose a wiser response, you're upgrading your mental operating system. The ancient philosophers who developed these techniques faced wars, plagues, and personal tragedies that would overwhelm most modern minds. Yet they found unshakable peace by training their thinking. You have access to the same tools they used, refined by centuries of testing and proven by modern neuroscience. Your tired, anxious brain can become calm, clear, and resilient. The blueprint is in your hands.